So let's talk today about a very important topic, which is personal to me in my own life, in my journey for the last, 25 years doing it, and for the last 40 years working as a plastic surgeon in the marketplace. Today is no exception, but today is extraordinary because I have a guest and he's a legend. And it's all to do with vision and visioneering. You know, in 2001, which is about 21 years ago, I launched what is called the first Asia Pacific consultation on discipleship, APCOD. And the birth of that particular consultation was the result of a vision that was challenged to me in 1997, July 31st. Now, this is one truth about a vision. Number one is you write it down. And number two, you run with it. So if you're not going to write it down and you're not going to run with it, it's not a vision. It becomes a dream. And so there's a big difference between vision and dreams. And so in 2001, I had written down 4 years prior to that, a vision that there will be a gathering of people, of leaders here, right here in Kota Kinabalu, 4 years from that date in 1997, on July the 25th to the 27th, 2001. It happened. 850 leaders from 36 nations gathered here in Kota Kinabalu. Now, the purpose that I'm trying to mention today is this. It is being sure. The vision is about being sure. If you're not sure, count it out. It's not a vision. So in 2001, there was this gathering. And 2002, I was in Brisbane in Australia. And I happened to walk into one of these bookstores. It's called Angus and Robertson. And I bought this book. And I hope you can see it. It's called Visioneering, 21 years ago. And 20 years ago, yeah. So it was written by Daffydd Wiesner-Ellix. And, it was about why do you get out of bed each day? And it was about visioneering, because what had happened was I had written down a vision. It happened, it took place, but I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what to do with it, to run with it, to sit with it, or whatever. And from 2001 after, we continued to have this Asia Pacific consultations in 4 nations. It moved on to Sri Lanka. From Sri Lanka, it went to New Zealand. And then from New Zealand, it went to India. And then it came back here to Malaysia. Now, the man who wrote this book, David, just a few months ago, I happened to get onto LinkedIn and I just typed his name in and I wondered whether he was still available for me to connect. And you'll be amazed and surprised that he replied. And he said, "Hi, Charles. Howdy." And today my guest is the legend himself, a visionary entrepreneur, a leader who is number one in the marketplace. And he is here with us. He's David. He comes to us live from Victoria in Australia. And so I'm not going to spend any more time introducing him because he's a legend. So let's meet the man himself, Daffydd Wiesner-Ellix. Come in, David. Welcome.
Okay.
Okay. So
all you got to do is learn to speak Welsh.
How do you say hello in Welsh?
His name is Welsh. It's Daffydd. Like
David.
TH on the end. Daffydd.
David. Is that right?
That's right. It's Welsh for David.
It's Welsh for it. So it's David.
Yes.
And how do you pronounce the second name? Wiesner or Wiesner?
With great difficulty. Wiesner-Ellix.
So where are these 3 names coming from? One is Welsh.
One
and
is
then
Welsh,
the other
one
2?
is German, and not too sure about the third one.
And that happens to be your surname, Wiesner-Ellix.
The name sort of takes a bit of getting used to.
All right. So you've got German heritage, and then you've got Welsh heritage. What else?
Well, there are 2 stories about the third one, the Ellix bit.
Okay, that's it.
One of the stories is that it was a Norwegian name or something, and they came out with the Vikings and settled in England, and the name changed. The other story is a little bit more romantic, and that is that one of the Ellixes met a female girl from Greece and changed his name because they wanted to get married. And it was not Alex, it was Alexopoulos or something like that. And they took off the Opolis bit and got married as Alex and went off to live in the UK.
So before we go into this whole concept of what you wrote and why you wrote the book, I want to just take one word out of it first, because everything we're going to talk about is about the future. Vision is about the future. It's about being sure of what you hope for in the future. So I want to start off the bat by asking you, can the future be shaped?
Well, the future is being shaped, whether we like it or not.
All right.
Right? It's what I call the lion effect. Right? Like it or not, Lion. The future, whether you consider the future as something you can have some sort of impact on or not, whether you like it or not, it's going to go on one way or the other.
So whether you like it or not, why should one even think about the future if it's just going to happen and keep changing? How does that affect the vision of what one has?
Well, that doesn't change the vision that you have. That's an inspirational thing which comes from inside. It's not something that necessarily comes from outside, although it can be changed by the external environment, if you like.
All right, because much of the vision that you and I are going to talk about is about the perception of thought, isn't it? How does one vision oneself in the future? It's all about perceiving, isn't it? It's about thought.
Well, that certainly is one of the key elements. There's no doubt about it.
Okay, so then let's go back to 1999. I'm going to turn the pages back to when you started this research in this book. What were you doing at that time? What were the circumstances at that time that led you to write it? Because usually you will write on something that's missing. Either it's missing in your own life or it's missing in the corporate world that you are engaged with. You know, I'm writing a book right now called MindFLOW Ergonomics because of 40 years of working in the marketplace of what I missed out in my life as a visionary. So what made you write the book, David?
Well, let me give you a bit of background that led up to writing the book and what's spurred me on.
Okay.
I left education. I was in education from leaving university and went out into the world. And I was a teacher for a number of years. Now, I left teaching after a while because of a lack of vision.
Lack of vision in the place you were teaching, or lack of vision for yourself?
A combination, really. I was sort of reached into that sort of stage of inertia almost.
All right.
And became frustrated with that situation and started to look around for alternatives. And one of those alternatives was the idea of working with people that could be involved in changing things. And I saw that as management. So I left education and went joined an organization called ATI, Australasia Training Institute, which did a lot of management training.
All right, let me stop you there, because there's a lot that I want to take out of you, because your book, I've carried it for 20 years and now I've got the man in front of me. So let me just kind of like go to your writings before it even went to print. So
okay,
what was the state of your life at that time?
Well, it was a bit of a mix.
All right.
No doubt about it. It wasn't absolutely clear one way or the other. Do I stay in education and work in it? Do I move into the management field? What do I do there? What do I do here? And that questioning process becomes a stimulant.
All right. So were there areas in your own behavioral patterns that you didn't like or you wanted to change? Because a lot of people are writing books out today, but they're not revealing the backstory, which is their own life. There are people whose lives are all messed up, who have, who have got divorces 3, 4, 5 times, who are, living in shambles in their own life, but they've got books out teaching others how to live their lives. So I want to run on a very personal note with you, because as a visionary yourself, David, was your life the way you wanted it to be, or did you have a vision of yourself first? I want to go to the personal side of it first, before you start looking for jobs that you felt were, well, what was your personal take on the vision of your own life at that time?
Well, I've been very happy with what I was doing. Okay. What I wasn't happy with was the situation I was placed in.
Okay.
And that drove my thinking about moving out of education and into business. So it was external influences, as well as the personal conversation you had with yourself about, is this all there is to the whole thing? What else is there? Why do I find myself in this situation? So you begin to ask all the W questions. Who am I? What am I doing? How am I going to get to where I think I'm doing something worth the effort? So that's the reverse W question, of course, but how is the W's at the end. But it's really when you start to ask those questions, and the key individual you're questioning about is you. Why do I? Why is this happening to me? Why am I having to deal with this? Why can't people see what it is that we're trying to achieve? So you go through that process, and then you begin to seek answers. And as you progress through the process, you begin to see opportunities or options that suddenly occur, and you've got the opportunity to explore those. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I'm saying is that you can put all the W's in front of you, but it gives you a picture of where you are in the present moment, in the present time. What I'm asking you is, when you set down, vision is about where you want to be, where you want to go, who you want to become. So before you can even talk about, when you are talking about visions today, if I were to look at the present situation and put all the W's, I wish, there was a letter Y after the W. W, X, Y, Z. So where does the X come in? So I wish I could chop off all the W's and go X, Y, Z, W, X, Y, Z. So what I'm trying to get to you is, you can, at that time, fair enough, you were assessing all the whys, the whats, when, and all that kind of stuff. But what did you have a vision of yourself, or where you wanted to go and become?
Well, it was very simple when I think about it. What I basically was asking myself is, what did I want to do with my life?
Right.
And I guess, like a lot of people, I sat down and I started to just jot notes down. If I did this, if I did that. But the bottom line was, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted whatever I do or did or was doing should make a difference. And otherwise, why am I doing it? Am I just being get the word out right, an anonymous preacher?
Yeah.
And I couldn't cope with that. The other side to my life and things that I've done involved music. And I've been involved in music for a number of years, for 65 years.
So in the beginning, when you were delving into music, like for me, I played the piano, I played the guitar. I find that it is one way of soaking all my W's into music because
Well, it's not only that; it's the influence it can have on people. I mean, I've played music and played in situations where people have come up to me afterwards and said, you know, that was really heartwarming, the way that you played that you did this. And I mean, that's a great feeling to actually do something that makes somebody else feel that their world isn't as bad as they thought it was, and they are happier. And to me, that's one of the ways I could make a difference. So, of course, I was involved in music alongside.
Okay. Let's just stay with vision and your corporate world at that time. Was there anything in your upbringing, in family, that kind of molded your thought life into where you wanted to be? You know what I mean? Because a lot of us, for example, I mean, I'm a visionary myself. I've seen it in action. But a lot of the baggage that I carried in my own life hindered my idea of where I wanted to be and in what direction I wanted to go. Because, later on, we're going to have a chat about core beliefs and core values. So I'm still trying to piece together your situation in 1999. Looks like, from what I'm hearing, is that the corporate environment, the situation that you were working was more intense to you to change. Is that correct? Am I right?
Well, that certainly was one of the great influences. The other influence, strangely enough, but in a positive, negative way, was my grandfather.
Okay.
My mother's father.
Uh-huh.
And he certainly had an influence, but in a strange way, he sort of used to dig needles at me on occasions. He was Welsh, and I still remember, and I can hear it in my head as he said it. We went to visit him once in Cardiff in Wales, and my mum and my stepfather and one of my younger brothers, we had all gone over to visit the family head, which was Granddad.
Uh-huh.
And I'll give you an example. I'll never forget the words. As I walked up the steps. He said, by goodness gracious me, it's the idealist.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help. I couldn't help myself. I mean, I had to then be as more of an idealist than I was, simply because it obviously was something that he thought was an unrealistic state of mind. But he had a sort of negative, positive influence on me. It sort of backed onto what he said, but I took it the other way round.
Yes, I think this is critical for the way you wrote the book. Now let's come back to the book now. So 1999, 2000, you put the question right in the front cover, and I want to put that question to you. Why did you get out of bed every day?
Well, if you go back to the book, the reason I got out of the bed every day at 5 a.m. in the morning was to research the stuff that I wanted to have as part of the book. So one of the reasons for getting out of bed was to complete the writing of the book. Prior to that, why did I get out of bed? As a teacher, I had a very clear view, a very clear paradigm about what I was meant to be doing, helping young people get images of themselves that were positive, so they had an identity that they could actually do something with themselves. So my teaching was very much aligned to that level of thinking.
How did you see yourself as a visionary yourself? I mean, it's always about where you want to go and what you think you're going to become. in the future, right? So I'm slowly moving you to this whole concept of futuristic thinking, thinking about the future. So how did you see yourself in that vision for yourself in the future?
Well, I guess I saw myself as just an individual who has done his best to achieve not only a good life for myself, but for others that I work with or were involved with as well. And I'll give you an example, Charles. Fade out, fade in from teaching and to about the end of the last century. And I was involved with the Salvation Army as one of their helpers, volunteers. And one of the bands I played with played at a dinner that the Salvation Army was holding to raise funds.
Uh-huh.
And I was sitting on the table with two friends of ours that came along with us, my wife, Annette, and I, and two friends. And on this table that's seated about 10 people, there were these two young people sitting opposite us. And one of them, the young man, was looking at me in a peculiar way. And we exchanged names. And he said, "Oh, Mr. Ellix." I said, "Yes." He said, "You don't remember me?" I said, "No, I don't remember you." He said, gave me his name, and I said, "Ah." I said, "Oh, well, I mean, I've taught thousands of students over the years, but nice to meet you again." He said, "Yes." He said, "You're the bloke that threw me out of the classroom." And there was this dead silence as everybody around the table looked highly embarrassed and wondered whether he was going to get up and slug me because I'd thrown him out of the classroom. And I said, "Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I only ever reserved that treatment for someone that did something terrible in this chemistry laboratory where we were working." And he looked at me for a minute or two as if he was taking it in, and then turned around and said, "You want to know something?" I said, "Yeah, tell me." He said, "It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. It changed my thinking."
There you go. There you go. Print it, please. Yes, there you go. I mean, this is, yeah.
So there is the vision come into effect. I made a difference in someone's life. And that was what I always wanted to do. And if I look back at my life over the last 70 years now, there have been a number of times I've lived up to the vision that I had and progressed down that path, from working in education, working with management in business, the charitable side of affairs, or so on, where I was involved in various activities, and from the presidency of clubs to just a guy that goes along and helps out where they're doing something to save or to help someone who needs the help.
Absolutely. I mean, that's powerful, David. And how did that word vision turn into visioneering? What is the concept of visioneering? Why did you put that as your title of the book? This is like 20 years ago. I remember when I did the first Asia Pacific consultation on discipleship, nobody knew what on earth was discipleship all about at that time. It was all about evangelism. And then I said, there's so much of talk about leadership. I want to know how it is to become a follower before I can become a leader. And so the word discipleship started coming into the vogue, and it became part of a lot of curriculums and all that. So visioneering, till today, not many people use it. And I think it's the key to driving a vision home in anybody's life. So what made you choose that title, David? You see, I'm spending this first part of a series of conversations with you, because to me, you're a legend. You're a visionary legend. And if there's anybody...
Right?
Yeah, I know that. And a lot of people have polluted the word vision and mixed it up with dreams.
Well, the thing is that the vision being visionary is a state of mind.
Yep.
It's a way of thinking about things. I mean, I've got a series of quotes that I've, over the years, have sort of driven my thinking into this idea of vision or visionary. One of them is Albert Einstein, who said imagination is more important than knowledge. It's not what you know, it's what you see. And Robert Schuller, who said, imagine what you would do if you had 100% chance of succeeding. Now, when you start to ask those questions and ask those questions of people, you begin to explore the idea of vision, something happening which has yet to happen, something which is yet to be formed, but has not formed, right? So it's out there in the future, and it just depends on somebody taking it on board and believing that it could actually take place. And that gives me a third quote, which comes from Henry Ford, and that is, just get the wording right. I'll come back to me in a minute. I want to get the wording dead right. So.
Sure.
Oh, but that's it. Whether you believe you can or whether you believe you can't, you're right.
All right. Absolutely.
Right. So a visionary is someone who's a can. Right?
Yes.
Because
Absolutely.
they believe they can actually do it. They believe it can take place. They can believe it can manifest. They believe it can be constructed. Right? It just takes somebody who believes enough that they will actually consider what options might lead in a particular direction and what outcomes will that produce that enhance the situation or the way things are for people at large.
Now, I mean, listen, I'm hearing you loud and clear because you're speaking to me, and so much of my life has been led by a vision, which is actually a spiritual vision, and you know, there's such a spiritual context to being a visionary, and a lot of people are just writing out visions, but they're trying to use it and come to see it in fruition using their own flesh and will. So what I'm coming to is that one of the greatest statements of vision is that without a vision, the people will perish. And whoever follows the law is a happy man. So I think the question of vision is all about the future, and you're right, that it is being sure. So anybody who is not sure that is going to happen in the present at some appointed time can throw it out and fit it in with dreams. That's the big difference between dreams and vision, because you are sure for certainty that it's going to happen in the present. I think that's the main criteria to differentiate between a vision and a dream. You know, you can spend the whole night and the whole day dreaming, but it'll never come to fruition because there is no urge, there is no longing, there is no hunger to see it happen in the present. Agree?
Yes, look, I agree with what you're saying. It's one of those areas that is hard to define completely because there are slight variations, but you're absolutely right in as much as it's coming from the future to the present, and a belief that you can bring it from the future into the present world is one of the key behaviors that identifies a visionary.
Absolutely great. I mean, so this is really nice to go to the next point I want to talk to you about, and that is in 1999, 2000. You know, David, human experience depends probably entirely on the human condition. You see, And the vision is all about the human condition coming into reality. I mean, I can have a great vision of changing the world in one way or another, but if my condition as a person is totally in disorder and dysfunctional, that vision will never come to fruition. So what I want to ask you is that your experience in changing behaviors and eliciting behavioral shifts, what was that at that time in 1999 in your working environment, and today when we talk about changing behaviors, because the world is changing so fast. And I know that 20 years ago, what we were facing and what we are facing today, how does that affect one building a vision?
Well, that's a very deep question, and really requires quite some time to address in detail.
Sure. But just go ahead with what you can, because changing behaviors can hinder the progress of someone building a vision, because people change, and I think that affects the visionary process completely.
Well, it brings you to the point where you've got to ask yourself what motivates an individual. So what behaviors do they display, or what identities do they have of themselves, which really opens the door to their ability to think, as we would say, as a visionary, right? Just trying to think of an example of what I mean here. There's in Visioneering, one of the areas I explored was what I call fundamental laws, the behaviors that exist. So a fundamental law is any law that changes the cause and effect of human behavior, right? Which is the definition I made for this, trying to explain what sort of behaviors you'd want from an individual, or how you would identify an individual who is visionary.
Right.
But there are behaviors that are governed by the way in which things are put together. For example, a fundamental law of gravity. Everybody knows that gravity works, right? So, and it controls our behaviors to some extent. Anybody, if somebody said to you, "Oh, I don't believe that this is the case or this is the case," for example, with gravity, you get them into a lift on the 30th floor and then have the lift start shaking a bit, and just watch their behaviors. They'll soon tell you whether or not they believe in gravity by the way they're trying to get out of the cabin and back onto solid ground.
Absolutely.
So there are things that we do or things that we don't do that govern our behaviors, and that's not identical for each individual. Well, there are some things where we might share in common, like, for example, with gravity, we share a belief in it because we know that it works, and therefore it affects the way that we respond or behave in certain situations. So looking at an individual, you might say, well, what sort of behaviors are they exhibiting? And where are those behaviors coming from? Is it something that they've learned? Is it something that they've observed? Is it a behavior thing that they got from, say, a parent or an individual who influenced their thinking, or which, of course, then comes back to affecting the behavior? Does that make sense?
Yes, go ahead, continue. I'm hearing you loud and clear, because a lot of what you're saying, the behavioral patterns are then translated into language that is taken into the marketplace. And you'll find that people are exhibiting, I'm talking about myself, because of the behavioral patterns that were ingrained in me growing up. and they became my thought life. They became my belief system that was totally in disorder and disarray, that I took it on to my family, my children, and also into the workplace. So I think this is very critical when people talk about vision and visioneering. For me, it's an engineering process. It's designed to make you a better person.
Absolutely. You're 100% on target. It's something you can learn. That's the first thing. Right? It's a behavior. You can learn it. It's got to start from somewhere. And it might be inspiration, right? The Christian thing of the Holy Spirit, for example, right? And having that sense of inspiration, right? But it could be someone in your life that just influenced your thinking and so forth, which has had an effect on your behavior and drives you in that direction. And it becomes then a desire to achieve something through a particular process, again, based on the behaviors that they've learned and put into application.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a page out of your book, because, and I want to just, because of time, and this is just the first part of tasting who Daffydd Wiesner-Ellix is all about. We've just had a taste of you. There's a lot more to drink in and suck in and breathe in. But I want to read this to you because, as I mentioned very clearly, the human experience is so dependent upon the human condition. And you relate this whole concept of vision and visioneering to the human onion as an example.
Yes.
And I just got my staff to do a study on the about the onion, and then a lot of the way it survives depends upon the environment. And if you keep the onion in the fridge, it lasts longer. If you keep it in a box, it lasts for a certain amount of time. And I think this is very interesting from the human point of view. That it says here, you know, if you keep an onion in the room temperature, it lasts for about 4 weeks. You keep it in the fridge, it lasts for about 3 months. But in our lifetime, we can last as long as the Lord keeps us alive, provided that we have nurtured that onion in a condition within itself and the environment to make it live the longest it can. So I'm going to read this from your book. When we study the full spectrum of the human experience, we study the most exquisite of all rainbows, from the murkiest black of deep depression or our darker side, to the brilliant golden yellow of love that goes way beyond self. When we peel back the layers of the human onion, we view the gamut from tears of joy to tears of pain. As we examine that which drives us or motivates us through our life's experience, that is the condition of a human onion. And I think this is a beautiful way to kind of like end our first session together, to lead us, because I know that when I peel the onion, there are tears that come up from my eyes. And it's this chemical that gets into the atmosphere, and when it starts to hit into your cornea and conjunctiva, you start tearing. But it's a beautiful way of the way you've written about the human experience and the conditioning of the human heart, mind, soul, and spirit to be able to live a fulfilled life. Now, I want to be able to end here with you, David. I want to end this on a high note to keep it in suspense, so that in our next session, we're going to peel those layers of the onion and get to the core of what it is to be alive today. It's a beautiful, loving world. It's a loving life. And what is your purpose? And, you know, have you been able to look back now as to your purpose and meaning in life? Would you say your life is fulfilled, or there is more yet to come?
Well, two things. One, have I completed everything? I've had an extraordinary 10 years, the last decade, a range of things, being run over by my own car, which was one of life's truly thrilling experiences, through to contracting Parkinson's disease. So I once remember I was in the United States and there was a road sign, which wasn't a road sign at all. It was just stuck up by someone. But it sort of bounced back at me a lot in the last 10 years. And the road sign said, "Be certain there's going to be a test." And I look at the ins and outs of my search for a visionary approach, and I can concur with that signpost. There is going to be a test, right? And every day you turn over and get yourself out of bed, and you get up and get organized, like I did this morning. I actually slept in for an hour. I didn't get up until 6. In sort of thinking about this time with you today. But
Brilliant. I hear you, because if it is of any consolation to you, David, if I were to remember and reflect, you cannot reflect until you remember something. So remembrance comes first. Like in the scriptures, it says, "Remember the things of long ago. I am the Lord your God." And then you begin a time of reflection. So the last 10 years for me was after open heart surgery and trying to put pieces together. And I came up with this whole concept of MindFLOW Ergonomics. And that is, how could I have done things better in the marketplace for myself and for those around me? And I think that this is between you and me. We've got, what, 80 years of working life, and age-wise 150 years or more. and I think that if we were to turn the pages, I think there are many more pages ahead of us, David. It's not yet done. The Lord hasn't done with us yet. But definitely you're right. Every day is a test. And just like you talked about the W's, they're also T's. So T for test, T for trial, T for temptation, and the biggest of all is T for thrive. How do we thrive in this world so complex as it is? And so on that note, David, I'm going to put a halt to our conversation. And what I want to do is your music. I want to end up on a very lovely note about your music. And I noticed that you played, or you did something with Judy Durham.
I played with Judith Durham at the West Australian Jazz Festival a few years ago now. And also at a couple of occasions when she came to Melbourne. And I was involved with a band at the time, and we joined the stage with Judith and her husband at the time, who was a pianist. His name escapes me at the moment. But yes, beautiful voice, beautiful feeling in her singing.
Yes,
no doubt about that at all. It was a
absolutely
pleasure to play with her.
Absolutely, I remember in 1960s, and the song that I loved the most was the one about "I'll Never Find Another You." And for those who have just who are listening in, Judy Durham was the lead singer, the female singer of the group called the Seekers in the 1960s. And the words that her voice was so unique, and you played with her. What a joy that must have been.
It's thrilling.
thrilling, there's a new world somewhere they call the promised land. And I'll be there someday. Join me, David. If you could hold my hand, I still need you there beside me, no matter what I do. For I know I'll never find another you. Amen. It's a long, long journey, so stay by my side. When I walk through the storm, you be my guide, be my guide. If they gave me a fortune, my pleasure would be small. I could lose it all tomorrow and never mind at all. But if I should lose your love, dear, I don't know what I'd do. For I know I'll never find another you. Well, and well, David, listen, it's been wonderful doing this part one with you. I know that there's more to peel, and I look forward to our next session together, where we will talk about the 7 layers of human operation. The 7 layers.
Cutting the onion.
As you peel the onion, that's right. So there are going to be some tears, there are going to be some joy. But at the core of every onion, a human onion, is the spirit life. And I believe very strongly that if we feed the spirit, the body, the soul, and the mind will take care of itself. So on that note, I want to say thank you for joining me on HEARTtalk. And for all of those who have listened in, you're listening to the legend himself, the visionary himself, the man who wrote the book, Visioneering, which I bought 20 years ago. And for me, it's available still in print. Is this still available, David?
I don't know, to be totally honest. I must tell you, came up with it the other day. I hadn't thought much about it at all. I have to ring Angus and say, what's going on, chaps?
Because I looked into Angus last night and I couldn't find it, but I can tell you one thing. Every CEO and every entrepreneur should have this book, because it is really a blueprint of how to get to the other side of life. And so on that note, I want to say thank you, and we'll talk again soon on HEARTtalk.
Well, thank you. And as the prophet says, take it easy, Charles, but take it.